All right, what's going on, everybody? It is currently here, 10:54 a.m. Saturday. Tried to get this podcast out sooner. Wanted James to come on. Plans fell through. We were going to do it last night. He canceled on me, and then this morning, we were planning on doing it this morning, but he's on his way to Philadelphia for the Eagles game. And he was like, I'll just do it in the car. And then he says, I got a car full. There's no way I can do it. So here we are. But 10:55 a.m. Saturday, January 21st. Just going to be me. I got to make this quick because I got to get this episode out ASAP. I'm trying to pull up. My power went out. That's why this is also coming late. There we go. Last week's scores. So just a quick recap here. Niners beat the Seahawks by 18 points. This game was honestly a lot closer than what the score would indicate. Seahawks were up at halftime. And if not for some turnovers in the second half, San Francisco probably doesn't win by a whole lot. So San Francisco and Brock Purdy showed some vulnerability. So I would keep that in mind. That was Saturday. And then the Saturday night game was the Chargers and Jags. Jags won in an epic, was it 20-point comeback? Let me check real quick. Well, before I do that, let me go back to the previous game. So San Francisco showed a lot of vulnerability, but the entire NFC is full of vulnerable teams. Seahawks, I mean, definitely not the end of the season that you want, but you got to feel really good about the Seahawks. If you're like the future of the team, if you're a Seahawks fan, nobody gave this team much of a shot. I didn't. I thought this team was going to win 5 games. I didn't believe – I love Geno Smith. He went to West Virginia, but I didn't believe in Geno Smith as a starter. Didn't believe in the front office just because they really haven't drafted or developed well in the last 5-7 years. But I do still have some respect for Pete Carroll. But exceeded expectations. That draft class is loaded with good talent. Charles Cross, Abraham Lucas, Tariq Woolen, Kenneth Walker. Like, they really got a star-studded class in the 2022 draft. And then they're going to have another really good have a chance, I should say, to have another really good draft this year. So I'm curious what they do this offseason. I would imagine they give Geno Smith a pretty lucrative deal. I don't think it's going to be $30-40 million, but, $50 million over 2 years maybe. I mean, that seems about reasonable. But, again, really like where the Seahawks are at. And the Niners advance. I'll get to them in a bit. Chargers at Jags. So, again, I was talking about this earlier. This was an epic game. Chargers were up. So James and I both picked the Jags, and we were in the minority, it felt like, all week. I heard a lot of people in sports media picking the Chargers. They were riding with the Chargers. James and I were like, look, we don't really have anything scientific, but we're rolling with the Jags just because we have more trust in Doug Peterson than we do Brandon Staley. Well, I turned this game on, and it was like 17-0 in the first quarter or, early second quarter. And I was like, oh, we might have made a mistake here. And then at halftime, I'm pretty sure it was 27-7, but I think it was 27-0 at one point. And then the Jags pull off an epic. And honestly, I'm jumping all over the place, but I remember in the moment thinking, like, this is not out of reach. And I heard Ryan Russillo say this one time, and I don't know why more people don't think this way in football. We think of a 20-point lead as insurmountable. But it's really a 3-point lead because the touchdown is 6 points. Sorry, I'm fighting a sore throat. But a 20-point lead, I'm like, that's really not that. I mean, obviously they can't have any more screw-ups in the second half, but that's not insurmountable. That's really just a 3-point lead. And what do you know? The Jags quit making mistakes. They play a lot better. And Doug Peterson gets the better of Brandon Staley in the second half, which is what James and I said would probably happen. We just didn't expect it to be a blowout in the first half. And then the Jags go on to win on a walk-off field goal. In regards to the Chargers, I'm very surprised that they have retained Brandon Staley. I thought he was going to be fired after this game. The Chargers really made a push to, go all in, if you will, even though I hate that term because I think it's overused. But they really made a push to make this team as good as it could this past offseason. Trading for Khalil Mack, signing the corner from New England. I can't remember his name. J.C. Jackson. They were one of the, teams that a lot of people were picking. I was not one of them. I thought this was a playoff team just based on the talent on the roster, but I don't trust Brandon Staley. And I'm honestly surprised that they have retained him, especially since his decision to play the starters in Week 18 when they really had nothing to gain was definitely a head scratcher. And then in the process, they lose Mike Williams, and it was a similar injury to what happened with Marquez Valdes-Scantling last year with Green Bay. Green Bay plays its starters for the first half, and then in that first half, they lose MVS for I think it was a back injury. He misses the rest of that game, obviously, and then he gets a week off because Green Bay got the number 1 seed. But then he ended up missing the San Francisco game. And then in that game, you can tell, if you remember the game, Green Bay's offense was out of sorts. They did not have a home run hitter on offense, and that was because of MVS's departure. And I think something similar happened to the Chargers with Mike Williams' injury. He got hurt Week 18, or maybe he was already hurt and he played anyway. Aggravated his back, did not play against Jacksonville, and you could tell that with the way the Chargers played offensively. They were just kind of out of sorts offensively. And so, I'm still surprised that they've retained Brandon Staley. But at the same time, I'm also not that surprised because the Chargers front office and the ownership is very cheap. The Spanish family historically has been very cheap. They are not going to move on from a coach unless they absolutely have to. And they probably justify that they don't have to move on from him because this team makes the playoffs. They can argue they're heading in the right direction, whatever. They're not. This team should have – the Chargers should have been like a 12-win team or maybe even a 13-win team. They should have had a similar season as Dallas. And they definitely shouldn't have lost to Jacksonville. That came down to coaching. And, they did have some injuries along the way. So maybe they really should have been more like a 12-win team or an 11-win team when you factor in injuries. This was year 3, too. So they're going to have to go into this offseason, and they're going to have to talk to Justin Herbert about an extension. And once you extend that quarterback, to a big contract, which I think they're going to do, you got to make some cuts to your roster, and I don't know who the Chargers get rid of. And it doesn't have to be this offseason, but in the next couple of years. So, Chargers, obviously their outlook is pretty good. When you have a quarterback like Herbert, you're going to have a chance to win a Super Bowl. But coaching, and their front office is actually pretty good at drafting and developing and signing players. And obviously being in LA, they're going to have a chance to sign players. But with Brandon Staley, I just don't see this team going anywhere. And honestly, with their ownership, I don't see this team going anywhere. All right, so Sunday games, I should say. Miami at Buffalo. This game was a lot closer than what it should have been. Buffalo made way too many mistakes, and it has me concerned. I picked Buffalo to win the Super Bowl in the preseason and right before the postseason. So this has me. Their mistakes in this game has me very concerned. They turned the ball over. If I can pull it up, like I said, I lost my power. It's not showing up. Wi-Fi is not showing up on my iPad. Hang on. I gotta reconnect. Dead air. All right, I'm back on the Wi-Fi. So Buffalo in this game turned the ball over. If it'll load, God, I'm so sick of my internet and my electric company for that matter. Buffalo turned the ball over. I swear to God, this fucking internet. You're offline. We'll try to connect you. Motherfuckers. Just everything's going against me to get this podcast out. So I'm just going to do it on my phone then and look like a moron. Wi-Fi is down. Unbelievable. All right. So the Bills turned the ball over. I'm so pissed. 3 times. You can't have that. This is like they've turned the ball over multiple times in the last couple games. It's becoming very concerning. But I will say, they are running the ball a lot better than what I thought, and that was always my issue with this team is their inability to run the ball outside of Josh Allen. And it feels like they have solved that. They're playing somewhat well defensively, or playing well defensively. They have got to quit turning the ball over. It worked against Miami, but Miami was down to its third-string quarterback. It was just shocking because Miami, I think, had the lead, tied the game at halftime. When in the first quarter, it looked like Buffalo was going to run away with the game. And then Buffalo ends up squeaking out a win. Survive in advance, I suppose, but gosh, my throat. But survive in advance, but if you're a Buffalo fan, you got to be pretty nervous. What else is there? Giants and Vikings. So I got to take a victory lap here. I have said all season that the Vikings were not that good, and I swear to God, this fucking Wi-Fi. Forget it. Just forget it. I got to take a little bit of a victory lap in this game because I have said all season that the Vikings weren't that good, they were overrated, and my opinion never changed. It never wavered. A lot of people mocked me, especially after that Buffalo game, although even though the Vikings won, if you really watch the game, the Bills gave that game away. And I've maintained that the Vikings weren't that good, and it was fully on display Saturday or Sunday. Because the Vikings could not stop a cold defensively. There's no reason why the Vikings should have lost that game. The Giants, and it's a credit to Brian Daboll, the Giants don't have the roster to stack up with the Vikings. And even then, I don't think the Vikings roster is that good. But at the top, the Vikings roster is a whole lot better than the top of the Giants roster. And I remember James saying that last week. He was like, I don't know who's going to cover Justin Jefferson. And Justin Jefferson really wasn't much of a factor. Let me look up his numbers. Now, oh my gosh. This fucking internet. I don't know if I'm going to get this episode out on YouTube in time. So Justin Jefferson, 7 catches, 47 yards, no touchdown. He was really a non-factor. So, like I was saying, the Vikings I can give them credit for winning 13 games, but when 11 of your wins are by one possession, and then you have a negative point differential on top of that as a 13-win team, that's all that needs to be said. And I tried to tell James that week after week after week. I was like, dude, look at their point differential. He's like, it doesn't matter, they're winning. I just said, dude, especially when it got later in the season, I'm like, they have a negative point differential for a 13-win team. And he kept scoffing at me until finally, I think it was either the Packers game or the Giants game last week, he was finally like, yeah, that was bad. That was bad. So Vikings, I'm sure it was a fun season for y'all. And I think Vikings fans knew that this season was not going to end well. They were going to be exposed at some point. And came in the wild card round. Although I'll be honest, I was not that sold that it was going to come in the wild card round. I mean, I think my hatred as a Packers fan, my hatred for the Vikings factored into me picking the Giants. But at the same time, I also was like, something about the Giants. Brian Daboll has done a really good job. And I'll talk more about the Giants here in a bit. But Vikings, I mean, disappointing end to a very fortunate season. I would caution a lot of optimism. Like, if you think this is what this team's going to be under Kevin O'Connell for the next 2 to 3 years, I would caution against that. Do not think that way, because 11-0 in one-possession games, that is not going to happen next year. A really good team or a good team in those games goes 7-4 or whatever. Like, I shouldn't say a good team. That's an average. Like, if with a quarterback like Kirk Cousins, and if you play 11 one-possession games, you should win about 7 of them. So 7-4, take away 4 wins, the Vikings were at 9-18, and that's about what they felt like. They weren't good defensively. And then offensively, they were outside of Justin Jefferson, and they were pretty limited, especially later in the season. They couldn't run the ball. Some of that, though, was injuries to their offensive line. And I'm not going to keep piling up on the Vikings. But if you think this team is going to take over this division and dominate and win 13 games for the next 3 to 5 years, I think you got another thing coming. Next year, I think the Vikings are going to fall back down to earth, depending on what they do in the offseason. Then the other Sunday night game, Bengals-Ravens. Much closer game than what I thought it was going to be. Tyler Huntley and Anthony Brown really did not play well in Lamar Jackson's absence. And I was all for, the Ravens when Huntley took over. I'm like, they're going to be fine. And then it took like 3 weeks, and I finally was like, this team is not fine with either of these quarterbacks. So I did not anticipate, going off that body work, I did not anticipate this being a close game on Sunday night, and it was. It's a credit to, I think, John Harbaugh and the Ravens organization. And the Bengals are kind of banged up too. But one play changed the course of this game, and it was the goal line fumble for a touchdown. If that doesn't happen, I don't think the Bengals win this game. And now they go on to play Buffalo, which I'll get into in a bit. As for the Ravens, I think their outlook is pretty bleak right now, because we don't know what's going to happen with Lamar Jackson. Look, I could do probably a whole podcast on my thoughts on Lamar Jackson. I understand him wanting to sit out because he's got money on the line. He wants a fully guaranteed contract, and he's probably going to get it if he hits free agency. But he wants a fully guaranteed contract, and he felt, if I play, I might risk that, which I can understand. But I feel like way too many people are on his side of things in this negotiation and blame the Ravens for not wanting to pay him, when that's been the opposite of the case. The Ravens have offered him contract after contract that would pay him over $40 million. It just wasn't fully guaranteed. And James and I talked about it last week. I don't know how you give him a fully guaranteed contract. He's not, really proven anything since he won MVP in 2019. The Ravens have won one playoff game, I think, with him since 2019, even including that 2019 season. It's going to be tough. My guess is he's not going back to Baltimore. And this is when, if I was Lamar, I love my mom. I would not hire her to be my agent, and I think that is what has stalled this process. He needs a real agent. And I think an agent would talk him off the ledge and make him take a deal from the Ravens. So if you're a Ravens fan, a lot of uncertainty entering the offseason now. And I think they'll be okay without him, but just because I trust John Harbaugh a lot. But they're probably not going to be a playoff team without Lamar Jackson. And then the Monday night game, Dallas and Tampa. This was the only game that I got wrong on my picks. I picked Dallas. I was 5-0 entering that Monday night game, and I was riding high. And I did not pick Dallas. I picked Tampa. Which was probably foolish because I was talking out of both sides of my mouth. And on one side, I was saying that Tampa, has no chance, or I shouldn't say has no chance. I didn't think Tampa was going to go on a run, like a lot of people did. I saw someone for ESPN picking Bucks to go to the NFC Championship. I was like, what makes you think they're going to go to the NFC Championship? But I didn't like the way Dallas was playing either. So game in Tampa, I was like, I guess I'll go with the Bucks. Turned out to be wrong, which was probably somewhat foolish of me. I should have banked on a team like Dallas, which, say what you want about Mike McCarthy, he took a lot of the blame, I guess you could say, from the divorce from the Packers and Aaron Rodgers. And it's hard to say that he's not coming out on top in that divorce right now. He's led the Cowboys to the playoffs the last 2 years, won 12 games the last 2 years. Now he's got a playoff win under his belt, and they're going to have a chance to beat the Niners, I think. So that's just where I'm at with Mike McCarthy, and I love Mike McCarthy. But with a team like that's well coached, like the Cowboys, with a proven quarterback like Dak, and that has played better all season, better than Tampa Bay. Probably should have banked on them after a rough couple of weeks, and I didn't, and I paid the price for it by getting the pick wrong. As for Tampa, I'll be very surprised if Tom Brady returns to the Bucs. I think he's more likely to go somewhere else. I don't think he's going to retire. I think the Dolphins make a lot of sense. I think the Raiders make a lot of sense. I wouldn't rule out, one of those other East Coast teams, the Panthers, the Giants, the Jets, whatever. Maybe even the Patriots again. But, if you're a Bucs fan, you probably don't feel good right now. You probably know this is the end of your run with Brady. Byron Leftwich just got fired. Todd Bowles was not impressive in his first year as head coach of the Bucs. Just like Baltimore, it's a pretty bleak offseason, I think, outlook if you're a Bucs fan. Then now you're picking later in the draft. You're probably not going to be able to get one of the top quarterbacks. Maybe you sign Lamar Jackson, I don't know, or one of the other veteran quarterbacks. But yeah, Bucs. You had a fun run here with Brady, but I think it's at its end. So let's get to this week's picks. I've already gone on long enough. Divisional round, always one of the craziest weeks during the NFL season. There's always a huge game, massive upset, whatever you want to call it. So let's start with the Saturday game. Jags at the Chiefs. Chiefs right now are minus 9.5. I got a feeling Doug Peterson's going to make this a game. Even though everything about this matchup says to take the Chiefs. The Chiefs have the advantage. Oh, my throat. Almost everywhere. Quarterback, coach, just personnel in general. But I got a feeling Peterson might ugly this game up because he used to coach under Andy Reid. He's going to know his tendencies. And then you could also make the argument for the other side that Andy Reid's going to know Peterson's tendencies. But I would take the Jags. I'm not confident in it, but I wouldn't scoff at the Jags plus 9.5. I think they can make this a game. But I am going to go with the Chiefs. Arrowhead's one of the toughest places to play. The Jags did show some vulnerability last week. They're riding high off that win or emotional win over the Chargers. First playoff win for the Jags. Well, not fairly recently in 2017, but this is a really young team. So I could see them having a letdown at the same time. So I will take the Chiefs, but I wouldn't be shocked if the Jags made this a game. Giants at Eagles. James is going to be there. Right now it's Eagles minus 8. Now, I will say I'm more confident in this game, like with the Giants in this game, than I am the Jags in the other game. I have a feeling the Giants are going to make this a game. So I would take the Giants +8. I feel a lot better about that than I do the Jags +9.5. You never know at these teams coming off a bye week. We saw it with the Packers last year. We see it all the time, actually. They might come out a little flat. Giants, I guess you could say they're riding high and might have a letdown this week. But I got a lot of trust in Daboll. They do have some veterans on their roster. I think the Giants might just come in and punch them in the mouth. Similar to what San Francisco did in Green Bay last week. However, I'm still going to take the Eagles. They're better in the trenches. They're also well coached. Just overall, they have the more, I almost said more better. They have the better roster. I think this is going to be a close game, but I will take the Eagles to win and advance. Sunday afternoon game, Bengals at Bills. This is going to be a close one. The Bills have to take care of the ball. If they take care of the ball, I think the Bills are going to win. They have not shown that they can do that. At the same time, I don't trust the Bengals because I think they've sustained too many injuries. My pick's not wavering. I'm still going to take the Bills to win this game. In regards to the turnovers and the almost lost last week, I think that's exactly what they needed to get back on track. I think Sean McDermott's going to have this team buttoned up and ready to go. So give me the Bills to win that game. And then the Sunday night game, or the Sunday afternoon, evening game, Cowboys at Niners. Vegas kind of agrees with me. I don't think that this is a foregone conclusion that the Niners are going to win this game. The Cowboys looked a lot better against against Tampa on Monday night. And the Niners really showed some vulnerability. I don't want to say teams have figured out how to defend Brock Purdy because I don't think that's the case, but the Niners did show some vulnerability. Because right now it's Niners -4. I don't think this is a foregone conclusion that the Niners win this game. With that said, I will take the Niners to win. But something tells me the Cowboys might make this a game, which is weird to say because we don't typically trust the Cowboys and we mock the Cowboys in this podcast where we've said several times we're an anti-Cowboys podcast. But I got a sneaky suspicion the Cowboys are going to surprise people in this game. But I will go with the Niners. They are the more physical team. They have the better roster. They have the better coach. I will say I'm concerned if the Niners offensive line can hold up against the Dallas pass rush, which reappeared last week. If the Cowboys can get pressure on Purdy, I think they have a very good chance of winning this game. But I will go with the Niners. So those are my picks. I got Chiefs, Eagles, Bills, Niners. I'm taking the home teams, which I will say probably unlikely to happen. I think one of these road teams will probably win. I struggle to see where that upset's coming from. Maybe the Bengals, Bills, if I'm being honest. That's probably the most likely. Then followed by Cowboys, Niners, then Giants, Eagles, and then Jags and Chiefs I would put last. So that'll do it for this week. I'll try to do maybe 2 episodes this week to make up, or next week to make up for it. I do have one somewhat planned with my friend Steven because next week they are revealing the Baseball Hall of Fame, and I would like to have him on for that. But I got to get this out there, so couldn't talk for too long. I probably talked longer than I should have. So it's 11:30. Game start at 3:30. I'm having internet problems. I got to get this thing out there as soon as possible. So hope everyone has a good weekend. Let's enjoy some football.